Hello, folks. This is Kenny Eric with what may eventually be called the Stronger Relationships, Better Business podcast, here to share my thoughts on a subject that some of you requested. As always, please hit that like button and subscribe if you like anything you hear here, as well as drop a comment on what you think about anything I might share. Now, a number of people reached out to me to ask my opinion on the recent Supreme Court ruling outlawing affirmative action as a criteria for admissions in schools. So I'm going to talk a little about that. I'd remind you that I also wrote an article which has a lot more detail, some videos, some other links in it that's an addendum to what I might talk about here. And I encourage you to go check it out. You can see it in the description box, some of what I said there. And I'm not really going to talk about whether or not I think affirmative action is a good or bad thing. I could spend an hour laying out both sides of the conversation on that. But what I want to explore more about here is what do we do now in the wake of that decision? I would also encourage any parents, family, friends, relatives, if you have a kid over the age of 10 who's got some interest in figuring out, okay, what do I do now to give myself the best shot at getting into a really good school, reach out to me. I mean, as you can see on the video, I'm black. I'm an Ivy League grad, and I was well on my way to a career before the age of 18 that's even harder to crack than getting into med school and become a doctor. So I have a lot of knowledge about what folks can do strategy-wise to prepare themselves to get in. So reach out to me. I can help you there. So I'm going to talk a little about my commentary on the subject. And again, not so much on whether or not I think affirmative action is a good or bad thing. My general opinion on schools using affirmative action is I think that any private institution, keyword private, not public as in a college accepts public monies, they should be more beholden to whatever municipality has an interest there. Private institutions or businesses should be free to provide what sort of ever preferential treatment, whether or not they make it about race or gender or how much money you have. They should be allowed to choose who and what they give preferential treatment to. And again, because it's a free country, America, the public can decide how they want to respond to that. First Amendment, freedom of expression. It gives you the ability to say and do things that you want within a certain legal context, but that doesn't indemnify you from any criticism. Well, I think nowadays a lot of people get that confused. They think that the First Amendment guarantees that no one can ever say or do something that offends you, which is not true. No one's above blame and criticism. So I think a lot of people forget that. And what I talk about here is more about what we do in the wake of the decision to prevent ourselves from getting swept up in a media hysteria or just to preserve our mental space, what we should be doing. And I'd say I'd have two general tips for that. The first tip is you want to guard your mental space and not let fear make your decisions. Fear is never really an emotion to be trusted. And when I say fear, I don't mean fear in the sense of I hear a loud noise or I'm gazing over a balcony that's 30 stories up and I feel some sort of physiological response to that. No, that's natural. That's actually a survival mechanism. I'm talking about the reactions to alarmist headlines and other sources of information who are setting to trying to get you to give some sort of knee-jerk reaction to something they share. You always want to be careful about how you react to those things and not let someone dictate what you should think or what you should say. You want to keep a nice, tranquil state of mind and start thinking before you react. And one of the best ways you can do that, preserving your mental health and mental tranquility in the wake of certain big news, is to first evaluate what's actually changed. Just because someone says something's changed doesn't mean anything has actually changed. Now, in this context, yes, officially, schools cannot use race, gender as criteria for admissions, but you really think that's going to stop? Schools still want diversity, even if it's only skin deep. I mean, you'd argue that maybe they should pursue more diversity of thought rather than worry about skin color, but that's a whole nother discussion. Schools are still going to want to prize diversity because most of the kind of students that schools want don't want to go to some homogenous population of students where everybody looks the same and does the same things. So schools are still going to try to find a way to diversify their student body. And again, just because something is official doesn't mean that that prevents certain behaviors from happening. In the article, I use an example about spades. If those of you who are familiar with the game of spades, officially, you can't tell your partner what card to throw down. But if I happen to look up at the ceiling while my teammate is deciding what to do, I think she can get a good idea of what I'd like her to do. Again, just because something is official doesn't mean that prevents certain behaviors from happening. On the negative side, historically, organizations have always found a way to get done what they want to get done. And I talk about this in the article as well. If any of you folks are familiar with the acronym NINA back in the early 20th century, no Irish need apply or no Italians need apply. A lot of governments would have these signs in their windows saying point blank, we only want a certain type of person entering our establishment. And after the 1940s and 50s, when that went aside, and some of the more enlightened government policies start to take effect, there were still plenty of places that were discriminating. They just had to do it in a more subtle way. For example, they might say, okay, you need a job reference for us to hire you. And if you're the wrong color, it was already very difficult to have these kind of references because you may not have much work history. So in essence, I didn't technically discriminate by race, but I've just found a way to prevent certain people from working at my business. Same way they did with grandfather clauses and poll taxes in the 1800s once everyone got the right to vote. These are still other ways to prevent people from voting. And again, organizations are always going to find a way to get done what they want to get done. And it's up to you to avail yourself of some of these side doors. Again, this is something I can help with if you reach out to me. Second tip I give, reframe the situation and understand the power that you hold in your hands. Now, one of the best ways that disadvantaged people can improve their outcomes is through ownership. Own assets, own your skills and ability, own the ability to tell your story in a way that draws people in. And all of us have things that we can offer the world. Is you want to do two things. You want to, one, create value, and then two, find ways to capture that value so you can exchange the assets that you have for things that you want. Easy ways to do this might be, all right, I have an interest in art or cooking. What are some of the ways that I can bring that to the world? Can I start a blog? Can I even reach out to other people and say, hey, I know you all have an interest in this. Let's start a group that talks about this. Or even ways to take advantage of people that care about you around you, like family and friends. It doesn't take much effort to reach out to relatives you hardly ever hear from and just continue a relationship with them. That way they can help you in the future. They take an interest in your work. You do the same for them. There's all sorts of good value in just maintaining good relationships with people that care about you. So you want to put to use the things and abilities that you have. Because even in the wake of this decision, there are still many ways that you can get what you want in education. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little about some of the issues with some test scores among minorities, Black Americans, etc. Now, there's real merit to the idea of some of the reasons why certain populations struggles because of certain endemic issues that the government was behind and other racist policies that existed for decades. There's some merit there. So it's very difficult to untangle, all right, is some of this a cultural issue, which there, in fairness, there is, as well as what are some of the ways that certain populations have been marginalized that prevent them from doing as well as they might. Which is one of the reasons why I didn't make this video about that, because I can talk about this thing for an hour. I would say that we still need to ask ourselves some hard questions, because usually one of the first responses some people give to, all right, what's up with test scores in the black community, let's say, why are they always perennially at the bottom? And some people say, if we're talking about the SAT, oh, it's cultural bias, because these questions are framed in a way that certain cultures are more familiar with. And I get that. There's some value there. They might also argue it's a wealth thing. You have access to better schools, better tutors, help on the SAT, etc. A good counterpoint to that might be, well, how do you explain how immigrants from other countries come here and ace the SAT? African immigrants, for example. I'm Nigerian, so I'm familiar with a lot of how African kids and other people from other countries do really well in the SAT when they get here. And these people have even less familiarity with the American culture. So how do you explain them? Some might say, well, it's that people who emigrate from these countries tend to be wealthy to begin with. There's some merit there, but again, it's a bit of an excuse, because not every person that comes from a different country is wealthy. A lot of times they come in poverty here and they still do well. So there's definitely some cultural questions that should be asked about why certain races do poorly on the SAT. But again, I don't want to get too far into that rabbit hole. That's something else you can discuss. I'd also say that, again, with this decision, there are a lot of decisions that are made behind the scenes. The game itself isn't always played on the surface. You got to understand that, all right, we've said this is the criteria through which certain decisions are going to be made, but there's still ways to navigate that. You have to understand there's plenty of unwritten rules that populate certain important games and decisions and contests. For example, in the article that accompanies this video, I wrote about Roger Goodell. He's the commissioner of the NFL, the most successful sports league in America. Now, he has done a poor job in some respects, but he's still in this position for over a decade now because he provides value to the owners. A lot of fans don't understand the way he does this. He understands why he's there. First reason is you got to make money for the owners. And second, you want to create a certain landscape that the owners appreciate that allows them to be competitive, as well as offer other off the book perks for allowing the owners to keep you in place. Goodell is there for whatever reason because, again, he understands that his job description surpasses what's necessarily there. He has to have the wisdom and discretion to know how to navigate when you're in a gray area. There's no one there to tell you what to do. He knows how to keep the owners looking good. He understands that there are times when he has to press forward and investigate certain issues, and there's other times when you have to have the wisdom and discretion to back off. Like, if you're dealing with people who have access to all sorts of money, elites in society, there's certain things they need you to know without being told. And the fact that he wields his discretion and knows how to handle these situations is one of the reasons why he's still in power there. And that's an argument I also make in the article as well. There are all sorts of unwritten rules and societal nuances that are important if you want to reach a certain level in all important areas of our lives, whether that's relationships, certain career areas, be able to accomplish things in business. People need to know that you can make decisions without always having your hand held. And unfortunately, there's lots of people, even if they're book smart, or they have the qualifications on paper to make decisions. Certain powers that be just understand, all right, we can't trust this guy to do the right thing that we need him to do without being explicitly told what to do. And there's real value in that. If you're the kind of person who exhibits that kind of wisdom, you're going to go far. Because there's people around who are going to want you around to protect their assets and protect them. That's another thing I discussed in the article. And again, this is why I always encourage, if you're listening to me on YouTube, check out the articles in the description, because I go into real depth. I link it to other articles in these pieces. So I always suggest checking them both out. What else can I talk about in this? I would also say 100% accountability. That's an article I've written before where I argue that the reason things do or don't happen to you is because of what you do or do not do. I think that's valuable here. There's lots of campaigning to make certain changes in education, socioeconomic changes, and these are noble. It's just very difficult to rely on other people to impact your life as well as you can do it yourself. There's certain changes you can make in your life. You can still advocate for certain initiatives, but you want to be doing what you can on your end to ensure that your goals are being achieved. And in the education realm, there's ways you can go about doing this. I just caution anyone not to rely too much on even well-meaning leaders in various institutions. You want to try to do things on your own that are going to get you there. And again, if you're a parent or family or friend listening to what I'm saying now, if you got kids that you care about that are you're preparing them for college, even if they're 9 years old, 10 years old, there's certain things you can be doing to ensure they have the best chance of reaching that, no matter what they look like. And reach out to me and I can help you there. So I just wanted to share some thoughts on the subject of affirmative action and diversity in schools and education. Again, let me know of anything you think. If there's any way I can help you as well, reach out. Take care.